Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I thought until Andrew Gold spoke this morning, I'd probably be the odd one out, i.e. a visiting Brit who's been working outside the country for 30 years, in fact, still hasn't, unlike Andrew, ever worked from Britain. I'm representing Statoil, I'm representing Norway. But what a great time to be here, and a very proud time to be here as a Brit. I was at the Olympics yesterday. I think the London 2012 event is actually sort of showing Britain from the rest side. The organisation, the service, the smiles, absolutely fantastic. A wonderful event, I think. And that's a huge boost for Britain. I just wish the Norwegians were doing as well as the Brits and as well as they do in the Winter Olympics. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to share a few thoughts on the Arctic, potentially the final frontier. We in Statoil are collaborating with many of you in the room on Arctic projects spanning from the Alaskan Chukchi Sea to the Barents, both the Norwegian and the Russian sectors of the Barents Sea in the far north. So why are we working across the Arctic? We are working across the Arctic because we believe its resources will be a critical source of energy for the growing world. Several others already spoken to it. We also believe that economic growth and rising standards of living will result in a more than 30% increase in global energy demand over the next 30 years. And in order to replace existing production and meet increases in future demand, the world will need all of the above energy strategy, and one that includes the Arctic offshore resources. We see great resource potential in the region. Some of the world's largest rivers, such as the Yenisei and the Lerna in Siberia and the Mackenzie in Canada, they flow north to the Arctic oceans, creating vast sedimentary basins. Preliminary studies suggest that the Arctic offshore contains 25% of the conventional yet defined oil and gas resources. And yet, the Arctic continental shelf contains some of the least explored basins on Earth. But just as we see great potential in the Arctic, we also see great complexity. And I believe that the offshore Arctic exploration and development will put new demands on our industry. Obviously, we face extreme and volatile climatic conditions, vast distances, and ice-filled waters in a lot of cases. The Arctic communities require special care and consideration. These are some of the most sensitive and vulnerable communities on Earth. The industry needs to meet these challenges proactively, with the highest standards on health, safety, environment, and operational quality. And in addition, we know that global media and social media will be watching us 24/7, 365. The world has started to think of the Arctic as a single region. Many of the companies here today have Arctic ambitions. But in my view, there are many Arctics. And we in the industry must recognize this and engage accordingly. We must understand that each Arctic community has unique interests and concerns, so local solutions will be essential. Statoil has positioned itself for long-term growth in the Arctic. We have unique experience of operating in harsh conditions from the Norwegian continental shelf, and we believe that we have the capacity to play a leading role in the partnerships that will unlock the potential of the Arctic. We have already strong acreage positions throughout the entire Arctic, and we participate in Arctic offshore projects in all phases of development. We think of the Arctic offshore basins in three categories. First, it's what we call the workable Arctic. They're those basins where we can drill and develop today with some modifications. Our positions in the Norwegian Barents and in the Grand Banks offshore eastern Canada are good examples of that. Second, what we call the stretch Arctic. They're those basins where we can drill today, but where we will require incremental innovation in the development and production stages. Our exploration plans, together with Shell and ConocoPhillips in the Chukchi Sea and the Sea of Okhotsk in the Far East Russia offshore, they fit into that category. And then finally, we have what we call the extreme Arctic. They're basins for which we need radical innovation in order to drill or develop, such as the east coast of Greenland, where we have served as an operator for the Canumas Group. Our commitment in the Arctic offshore is part of who we are, Statoil, a technology-focused upstream company with the ambition to be a leading exploration player. But long-term success in the Arctic offshore will be about much more than experience, acreage and technology. Success in the Arctic is also about taking the right approach. It requires a strong commitment to safety and flawless operational execution. Political will has opened different parts of the Arctic for energy development, but we in the industry must not take for granted legal permits to be permanent access. In a new frontier, access must be earned again and again. And in the Arctic, we must take an approach that focuses on trust, shared value, and innovation. In the early phases of our operations, i.e. the seismic, the exploration wells, we need to establish trust between the communities, governments, and industry. And trust can only be built on a bedrock of openness, dialogue, and responsibility, and on a commitment to zero harm and sustainability. Once development begins, we must take our engagement to the next level. We need to move beyond CSR initiatives and emphasize shared value. We must respect traditional ways of life, but also offer Arctic communities the option to take a meaningful place in our business model and a future role in the emerging Arctic offshore industry. The full potential of the Arctic can only be unlocked through innovation, i.e. more collaborative business models and more joint technology programs. This is the only way to reduce costs and make Arctic projects commercially viable and globally competitive. I believe that the approach we're taking in Statoil will make us a strong partner for communities, governments, and our peers. And that's important because in the freezing cold of the Arctic, no one can survive alone for long. Let me turn a little bit to the Norwegian Arctic. Whenever our industry has moved into new geographies or new resources, we've faced skepticism and sometimes criticism. Our first move into the Arctic was in Norway, and it was not very different. In Hammerfest, in the northernmost part of Norway, after discovering the Snøhvit field in the Barents Sea, we didn't settle for legal compliance. We built trust with the community by focusing on dialogue, transparency, and responsibility. We treated the local community as a key partner. We ensured high quality, local content for our projects and an economic future for the community. And we enabled the people of the region to benefit from our industrial activity. And that investment in the community has paid off. 26 years after the discovery, we celebrated the opening in 2010 of the first LNG production plant in Europe. It's the world's largest unproduced, or was at that time, unprocessed multi-phase pipeline, and the first major Norwegian continental shelf development without any surface installations. Snøhvit is expected to produce up until 2035, and that says a lot about the long lead times of such complex projects, illustrating at the same time the importance of working with local communities. During the 1990s, the biggest threat to Hammerfest was economic decline and population loss. Today, Hammerfest is growing again, the optimism is back, and the future is bright. Oil and gas development in the region has revived the town's fortunes. And Statoil has developed this approach close to home, but we believe it can add value to operations and partnerships throughout the Arctic. Since the discovery of Snøhvit, Statoil has broadened their position in northern Norway and beyond. We're currently developing together with Eni the Goliat oil field in the Barents Sea. It will be coming on stream soon. and we have been fortunate enough to make two large oil discoveries recently, Skrugard and Havis, and are moving forward with appraisal and development programs for those. The opening of the Russian offshore and the border settlement between Russia and Norway has also created new possibilities for us and others with our northeastern neighbours. And we're building strong partnerships in North America too, already with ConocoPhillips in the Chukchi Sea and with Chevron in the Beaufort Sea and icy waters of the Grand Banks, and hopefully there will be more. As I said, collaboration and partnerships will be the key to develop in the Arctic. And even greater collaboration is needed to drive down costs, to develop Arctic-specific technologies, and to convince our stakeholders and local partners that the industry can respond to emergencies in extreme Arctic conditions. There is no margin for error. A spill in the Arctic could close the region for development for decades and deny the world an important source of energy. So, by conclusion, for centuries, the history of the Arctic has been characterized by a cycle of boom and bust. Fishing, fur trading, mineral extraction, oil, gas. But this time, I think it's different. This time, the emergence of the Arctic has the potential to be one of the defining economic and political issues of the 21st century. Our industry is the very center of this issue. Arctic nations are actively collaborating on boundaries, on environmental research, and on regulations. It's time for the industry to do the same by establishing trust, articulating share value, and focusing on innovation that will be vital to our collective success. And Statoil are prepared to play a leading role in that. Thank you very much.